probably walked past a place like this without knowing it. A town. Empty. Frozen mid-sentence. The plates still on the table. The curtains still hanging in the window, as if everyone simply stood up and left. They did. In Western Australia, past the last servo, past where the bitumen turns to dust, there is a town called Gwalia. For over 60 years, it held more than 1,000 lives. Then, in less than 3 weeks, almost all of them disappeared. Why would an entire community vanish that fast? And why does the answer lead somewhere you would never expect to find it? Your mind likes order. It likes beginnings that lead cleanly to endings. Gwalia does not give you that. It gives you a town that grew out of nothing, thrived for generations, and collapsed almost overnight, leaving behind a silence that nobody has fully explained. Start at the beginning. In 1896, gold fever swept through Western Australia. Prospectors moved through the desert, chasing rumors, chasing glints in the dirt, chasing a future none of them could guarantee. Near a settlement called Leonora, one of those rumors turned out to be true. Within months, a new town appeared beside it. It had no plan, no surveyed streets, no grid. Workers threw up shelters from corrugated iron, Hessian sacking, whatever timber they could scavenge. A town built not by design, but by necessity. They named it Gwalia, an old poetic word for Wales, given by a prospector who staked one of the earliest claims. At the center of it all sat a single growing hole in the ground, a mine that would become one of the largest gold producers in Australian history. And the man sent to run it would go on to do something almost nobody connects to this dusty outback town. In 1898, a London mining company sent a 23-year-old American engineer to inspect the site. His name was Herbert Hoover. He recommended the company buy the mine. They did. They made him its first manager. Hoover redesigned the operation. He built the mine offices. He commissioned a house on the hill above the settlement, a grand residence meant for himself and his wife. He didn't stay long. Within a year, the company transferred him to China. But 30 years later, that same man became the 31st president of the United States, which means a house built in the middle of the Western Australian desert was designed for someone who would one day sit in the most powerful office on Earth. Almost nobody who drives past. Gwalia today knows that. It sounds invented. It isn't. After Hoover left, the mine kept growing, and so did the town around it. By 1911, Gwalia and its neighboring settlement held over 3,000 people. This wasn't a typical outback town. It was something stranger. A melting pot dropped into red dirt and silence. Italian migrants, Yugoslav families, Afghan cameleers who had crossed the continent on camel trains, Aboriginal workers from the surrounding country, whose connection to that land stretched back tens of thousands of years before the first prospector arrived. All of them, side by side, in a settlement that hadn't existed 15 years earlier. The town built its own tramway, its own swimming pool, Western Australia's first government-owned hotel. By the year 1900, it also had roughly 21 illegal drinking houses operating in the shadows, more than almost anywhere else in the colony, mostly run for migrant workers who avoided the formality of the official hotel. For over 60 years, the mine kept pulling gold from beneath the earth, and the town kept living its strange, layered, multicultural life in the middle of nowhere. Then, almost without warning, it stopped. By late 1963, the mine had been running at a loss for years. The numbers no longer worked. The decision, when it came fast. On the 28th of December, just days after Christmas, the final whistle blew. 250 men lost their jobs in a single announcement. What happened in the weeks after is the part that still unsettles people who hear it for the first time Trains were sent from Kalgoorlie to help residents leave. Families packed only what they could carry onto those trains. In under 3 weeks, Gwalia's population fell from around 1,200 people to just 40. Most of them never came back. They left behind furniture, clothing, children's toys scattered mid-play, half-finished meals abandoned on kitchen tables. Some homes were emptied so quickly that decades later, visitors walking through them would describe an eerie, specific feeling. Not that the people were gone, but that they had only just stepped out and might walk back through the door at any moment. Why does a place like that feel so different from an ordinary ruin? Here is where it gets interesting. Gwalia is not unique. Australia holds hundreds of abandoned mining towns scattered across its deserts, most collapsed by the same forces: drought, depleted ore, shifting economies. But almost none of them pull people in the way Gwalia does. The geographer Yi Fu Tuan spent decades studying why certain places generate intense emotional attachment in people who have never even lived there. In his influential 1974 work, he gave that pull a name: topophilia, the love of place. Not nostalgia for a memory you personally hold, but a deeper, almost involuntary bond formed simply by standing somewhere and sensing what it once held. Gwalia generates that response because it refuses to fully become a ruin. A ruin has collapsed. A ruin has decayed past recognition. Gwalia, by contrast, was preserved almost exactly as it was abandoned, which means your mind cannot file it away as history. It files it as suspended. The cultural historian Svetlana Boym wrote extensively about this kind of suspended feeling in her research on nostalgia, distinguishing between the kind that simply longs for the past and the kind that aches for an unfinished moment, a story interrupted before its ending. Gwalia is an unfinished moment, a whole town of them, and there is a reason your brain responds so strongly to that. Psychologist Konstantin Sedekidis, whose research on nostalgia has spanned decades at the University of Southampton, has found that the emotional weight of nostalgic and place-based memory isn't really about the past at all. It's about meaning. Humans reach for these suspended moments because they offer a kind of psychological anchor, a reminder that lives once lived here mattered, even after the people who lived them are gone. That's what a half-set dining table does to you. That's what a child's toy left mid-play does to you. It isn't really about the object. It's about the proof that someone was here, living an ordinary day, with no idea it would be their last. Stand in one of those preserved cottages today, and you can still see the layout exactly as the final residents left it. A function house with a piano still sitting on the patio. A guest home where the dining room remains set the way it was the night the whistle blew. The mine itself didn't stay silent forever. By the early 1980s, new extraction technology made it profitable again, and a new company reopened operations, this time as an open pit. Today, the site is run by a different operator again, mining one of the deepest underground trucking operations in the country, more than 1.5 kilometers beneath the surface. So the gold never really left. It only waited, but the town above it never recovered the same way. Today, only a small handful of homes in Gwalia are occupied. The rest remain as a kind of open-air museum, preserved not to look pristine, but to look paused. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. A museum behind glass tells you a story is finished. Gwalia tells you the opposite. It tells you a story was abandoned before its ending, and that the ending is still, technically, possible. That tension is why heritage workers who restored the site's original miners' cottages have said their goal was never simply to stop the buildings from collapsing. It was to stop an entire way of life from disappearing from memory completely. Because a building left standing keeps asking a question that a demolished one cannot. What was it like the day everyone left? Your mind doesn't actually want the whole town. It wants that one moment. The unfinished sentence. The plate that was never cleared. The hallway someone walked down for the final time, without knowing it was the final time. That is what keeps drawing people back to Gwalia. More than 60 years after the whistle blew for the last time. Not the gold. Not even the history. The unfinished moment. Still sitting there, waiting. You've probably walked past a place like this without knowing it. Maybe you still will. But now you know what you're really looking at when you do. Not an empty building. A moment that never got to finish. And some quiet part of you, standing there, still believes it might.